Welcome to a discussion on the dynamics of urbanization in India. This discussion relates to our MA program in Sociology, specific to MSO 004, Sociology in India. Urbanization as a term has widely been used by the sociologists, political scientists, economists, demographers, politicians, policy planners, and varieties of other intellectuals. Urbanization has emerged to be one of the realities, a process, one of the renowned process, and also one of the phenomena of humanity on this earth. However, the term urbanization has been diversely used by diverse categories of the people. Specifically, sociologists has used it in a wider context, and this usage is also having both geographical and historical variation. If we look into in terms of geographical variation, we find that Western sociologists, American sociologists, they have seen urbanization from a perspective different from those of the Indian perspective. However, in general, there has been a consensus in understanding, in developing a sociological understanding of the process of urbanization. If we look into a sociological definition, why do we look into in a relative terms when we talk about urbanization is relatively a large, dense, and permanent settlement of socially heterogeneous individuals. This kind of understanding is widely given. Humanity is always there, geography is always there, settlement is always there, and heterogeneity of population is also there. However, these are to be looked into a relative term. How it is looking into in a relative term, what he is talking about, that is urbanization is relatively large, it is linked to relatively dense population and a permanent settlement population, and population are to be heterogeneous. And when he has talked about humanity settlement like this, he has talked about only in terms of concentration of population in a geographical space and having an element of permanency. If we go one step further, sometime in 1980s, famous sociologist Manuel Castles, in his famous book, The City and the Grassroots, what he talked about urbanization along with the whole element of density of population, its largeness and permanence in settlement, it's also having an element of struggle and conflict among varieties of the groups, those who are settled in the urban areas. What are those groups? He identified those are the workers and the industrialists, the city people and the newly immigrant people, the elderly generation and the new generation. Within that, he found a conflicting and a kind of a situation. There are people with conflicting interests. So we find two kind of definition, rather two kind of conceptualization of urbanization. One we talk about is a pure human settlement with largeness, density, and permanence in settlement. Then we talk about the within the settlement there is a component of struggle and conflict. Then how this struggle and conflict to be looked into? David Harvey widely talked about those conflicts are to be looked into in political, economic, and social terms. Because it is not only what he is talking about, there is a conflict, but conflicts are to be qualified. That qualification is coming in terms of embeddedness of this conflict with the political interest, economic interest, and cultural interest. Now, what we have seen, this kind of definition, those are the rather conceptualization in classical term. If we go further, we find that in a contemporary phenomenon, the cities across the globe have taken a different term. Because the function of the cities have changed, the number of the people coming and the kind of people coming to the city areas, they have also changed. So here, Saskia Sasan widely talked about the function of the city had changed, its character had changed, and within the city, there are varieties of population, and those population can be characterized as a we versus they. What are the we he's talking about? This is the settled, urbanized, upper class, the industrialist and other are upper strata, those who are controlling the economic capital, social capital and cultural capital of the society, they happens to be the urban natives. Besides that, there is also another category, what he talked about, that is there are also they. Who are the they? They are the immigrant, the migrant in the urban areas. So there is a cultural contradiction, economic contradiction, and political contradiction. So these are widely accepted kind of conceptualization of city in the sociological parlance. But if we look into city from the Indian perspective, we have seen city not in economic terms, rather in functional terms, and also in terms of the varieties of concentration. The concentration of cultural capital, spiritual capital, the economic capital that is taking place. So within the whole process, it has seen the city as a kind of interdependence among varieties of the groups. So what it has developed, a kind of an urban ecology. Within that urban ecology, varieties of the groups, the ethnic groups, the natives, the immigrants, all are interacting, and in the process of interaction, they have developed a different kind of a social structure, that is urban social structure. But what it is widely talked about in Indian society, the cities in Indian society are having enormous civilizational function. That is, if we looked into it, has been the epitome of sophistication of cultural artifacts, the art, music, science, technology. Those have been sophisticated, nurtured in the urban culture, and gradually it has been disseminated to the other parts, that is from urban to the rural areas. And also urban areas has been seen gradually, starting from the arrival of the British, the urban areas has been the epitome of modernization and epitome of westernization, because it is through those processes and through those new institution, urbanization has got a different kind of a shape. So what we find that urbanizations are seen not only in terms of population and its density and settlement, it has also, we have also seen urbanization in terms of certain civilizational function, certain developmental function, certain modernization and westernization function. So what we find in the whole process, that urbanization in Indian context is to be seen both in terms of interdependency and also in terms of conflict among the varieties of the groups, those who are coming, the natives and the immigrants, the upper strata and the lower strata, varieties of the ethnic groups. So what we are having, a kind of intersectionality between the caste, class, ethnicity, even in urban setup, and through which a different kind of urban social structure has been evolved. But when we're talking about urban phenomenon in Indian society, we have to accept that, we have to accept this fact, urbanization has developed in India not in isolation, rather it has been a part of long-standing social, cultural and the historical process. So what we look into in urban setup, we find that in urban setup in Indian society, urban areas in India historically developed maybe 5,500 years back. When you talk about the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization, they are the traces of urban civilization available in terms of the urban planning, in terms of the housing, the drainage, the water storage system, the food storage capacity. So all those are manifested in this Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization. Those are roughly around 5,500 years back. We have also found the urbanization process. Those have remained in Indian society, say during the time of Kanishka. There was a city in Kanauj. Say Pataliputra is another city. It developed in the roughly around 200 years BC. If we look into the Mughal period, we find several cities have come up in Indian society, in India. Delhi became one of the cities that is patronized by the Mughal rulers. And then we find historically, if we look into city also developed in India with the patronage of the British. That is, we find cities have emerged in various places, Calcutta, Chennai, Bombay, Visakhapatnam. So varieties of the cities these also developed. It is not to say that Britishers promoted the culture of development of the city. City was already there in Indian context, and the city, town and urban agglomeration, those were already there, those got enormous scope of proliferation with the expansion of the trade and commerce during the British period and the post-British period. That is a kind of phenomenon historically. But if we are to conceptualize urbanization, and we should conceptualize that how we are to sociologically conceptualize urbanization. When we talk about urbanization, we talked about urbanization, the movement of population from village to an urban area, where the economic activities are concentrated in the non-agricultural area. So what do you find? That is, when you're talking about urbanization, we are talking a process of shifting of population. So what we find, that is, along with shifting, there is also shifting of the economic phenomenon. Third, another important shifting is also that what we talk about a socio-cultural phenomenon. So urban area is looked into in terms of a transition, in terms of a progression of the society from one stage to another. The first element of urbanization, we talk about a demographic of spatial transition. That is, a demographic spatial aspect of urbanization deals with the migration, deals with the shifting of population from rural to the urban areas, and mostly from a less dense city to a more density oriented areas. So it is a kind of a demographic phenomenon where the people is shifting from rural to the urban areas, from less dense to a more densely populated areas, this migration. Second important component is that economic transition. If people are shifting from the rural to the urban areas is predominantly founded on the agricultural activities. So what we find in the urban areas, a kind of shift towards non-agricultural activities. So economic shift, that is economic aspect of urbanization, usually relates to change from agriculture to the non-agricultural occupation. And usually by non-agricultural, we mean it will be either industrial and manufacturing or to the service sector. So gradually there will be shift in the economic aspect from agriculture to the non-agricultural activities. Third important aspect is that a shift from in the socio-cultural dynamics. That's why the sociological component come in. That is, we are talking about the emerging heterogeneity in the urban areas. When you talk about the rural areas, we find a relatively homogeneous people having more or less similar kind of economic activities, similar kind of social background, similar kind of, not the same, similar kind of socio-cultural background. But when you come to the urban areas, it's the kind of assemblage of varieties of people from various parts of the country and various parts geographical location. So we find a heterogeneous formulation. So what we have talked so far, that is urban area, when you are talking about in terms of a shifting of certain phenomenon of the society, the demographic phenomenon in terms of population, economic phenomenon in terms of non-agricultural activities, and third is the socio-cultural aspect that is shifting from homogeneity to heterogeneity. And this is widely reflected in varieties of urban formation and the town city formation in the country. In India, if we looked into the historicity of the development of town and cities in India, we find cities are can be classified. These are classified in terms of certain function cities are performing. Because what we told earlier, that is, cities are having certain economic function. Some cities are classified in terms of the trade and manufacturing kind of cities. Say Agra and Kanpur and Calcutta, these are widely talked about the trading and manufacturing cities. Agra leather industry, Kanpur leather industry, Calcutta jute industry. So similar can be attached to various other kind of cities. We are also having certain political cities. Say during British period, Calcutta was the political city. Now Delhi is the political city, the political capital of India. Now we are having the military city. Say Meerut, Pune, these we call the military city, the Jodhpur military city. So here lot of concentration of the defense people, so accordingly cities are formed. We are also having the port cities, the Khidirpur and Calcutta, similar Vishakhapatnam is another, Andhra Pradesh. So we find various cities performing the function of the port. We are having this various cities evolve in contemporary India, performing the educational function. Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, Delhi, Calcutta, even Kota is another. So we find that varieties of the cities, those who are functioning, giving the function, educational function. Importantly in India, since India is having a spiritual background, so varieties of the cities have emerged in terms of the religious function it's functioning. So Banaras is having Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. Similarly, Vrindavan, Tirupati is another. So we find that these kind of cities have emerged to suffice the function, the religious function, the pilgrimage and the temple town. So what we find, the varieties of the cities have emerged, and all these cities have emerged based on the concentration of these four important components. One component, that is population component, the density of population, is the economic function. Third, we are talking about a demographic transition. Fourth, we are talking about the cultural function. So all these components are gradually shifted to the formation of different kind of cities in India. But cities are also, since we are talking about certain parameters in functioning, cities in India are defined differently starting from the British period. We have found that during the colonial period, cities are defined differently than there is a post-colonial India. And also in post-colonial India, cities are also, definition of the cities have also changed. Let us take, for example, how cities were defined in 1901 and how it continued till 1960. 1960. It was defined in the colonial period, that is every municipality, cantonment and all civil lines, and not excluded the municipality. So what it is talking about, every municipality, cantonment and all civil lines will be considered to be a city or a town. Besides that, it is also considered that every other continuous collection of the houses permanently inhabited with not less than 5,000 persons may be considered a city. So a city is having two components talked about, that is some of the areas already defined under the municipality or cantonment or civil line should be considered a city, or certain continuous household, related household inhabited with not less than 5,000 population. So this definition of the city continue till 1960. Why 1960? Because in 1961, the census of 1961 gave a different definition of city, that is the urban area it's talked about. In urban area, it also identified certain parameter to identify how the cities are to be defined. It talked about city, that is a place which is either a municipal corporation or a municipal area or under a town committee or a notified committee or a cantonment should be considered an urban area. Here the term, we are using the term urban area. Then to define the urban, it also second category. First category is talked about the place under municipal corporation. Second, it is talking about any other place that satisfied the following four criteria. What is that? A minimum of 5,000 persons, 75% of the working occupation are non-agricultural. Number 3, a density of not less than 1,000 people per square mile. And fourth, a place is having certain pronounced urban characteristics in terms of availability of urban amenities. So what we find is shift from colonial definition to a kind of Indian definition of Indian census. It is talking about a place having minimum 5,000 population, number 1. Number 2, 75% population having non-agricultural occupation, and it is density not less than 1,000 people per square mile, also talking about presence of urban amenities. Now, what is taken in 2011 census, it is improvised upon the earlier definition. it has written the first part, that is all places with a municipality corporation, cantonment should be considered as an urban area. Besides that, it is talking about first component remains, that is 5,000 people, a concentration in a particular area. Number 2, 75% of the main working population, because it is talking about importantly main working population, and in earlier case it is talking about the working population, occupation. Main working population means that we are identifying the people, those who are getting more than 180 days of job in a year. So those category of the people, the main worker should have 75% of those workers should have non-agricultural occupation. It is also talking about density of the population, 400 population per square kilometer. So there are two variation in terms of it is talking about working population, that is 75% working population, main working population, and density of the population is to be 400, and also presence of urban amenities. So what we find a kind of variation from the colonial definition, also definition of 1960s. 2011 definition also talked about urban agglomeration and the urban outgrowth. But urban outgrowth it talks about, that is outgrowth is a viable unit such as a village or a hamlet or an enumerated block made up of such villages or hamlet and clearly identifiable in terms of boundaries and location, just like a railway colony or a university campus or a port area or a military camps. Those who are attached to or linked to an area, they were the urban outgrowth. It's having the presence of certain urban amenities. It's also talked about the urban agglomeration. By urban agglomeration, it talked about an area which is having roughly around 20,000 population, having other kind of phenomenon, that is 75% people with non-agricultural occupation and 400 people per square kilometer density. So what we find along with urbanization, it talks about urban growth, it's also talked about the urban outgrowth, urban agglomeration. If we look into now that what kind of urban space in India in terms of number, the statistics, 2011 census shows that 7,935 cities, town or urban agglomeration present in India. So number of the cities and towns in India, it has changed. But the cities of 2011 census, it is classified into 6 categories. That is class 1 cities having more than 1 lakh population. 46 there are class 1 cities in India. Then we are having second category city, that is 50,000 to 99,000 people living in those urban agglomeration, that is those cities. B category city, it talks about the C category, D category, E category, F categories, rather class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 categories of the cities. Importantly, 75% of the urban population in India live in the A category cities. Who are the A category cities in India? I mean, there are 46 A category cities. Importantly, if we were to take name of those 6 categories, A category cities, importantly, Bombay is the number 1 A category cities in terms of population. More than 12.5 crore population, more than 12.5 crore population live in Bombay city, 11 crore population live in Delhi, Bangalore 8 crore population, Hyderabad 6 crore population, Ahmedabad 5.5 crore population, Chennai 4.6 crore population, Kolkata 4.4 crore population, Surat 4.4 crore population, Pune 3.1 crore population, Jaipur 3 crore population. So what we find, Bombay ranks the high in terms of the high concentration of the population and highest number of urban population in India. Now, over the year, if we look into what had been the urban growth, pattern of urban growth in India, that is the number of the people having those kind of a density and those kind of concentration and non-agricultural occupation. In 1901, only 11% of our population living in the urban areas. And 2001, that is after 100 years, it has increased to 28.53%. And 2011, it is 32%. Now, 2017, we talk about that the World Bank estimate that is 34% of the Indian population live in urban areas. So what we find, the space of urban growth has been quite slow in India, if we look into. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of population concentration. So it has grown only threefold growth from 11% people living in 1901, 11.4%. Now it is only 34% of the population live in the urban areas. So that is the kind of urban phenomenon that has grown in our country. Now, to expand the urban growth, number one, and also simultaneously to have a qualitative growth in the urban cities, there has been from the middle of this decade the concept of smart city. The concept of smart city is quite new in India. It talks about manufacturing and education that have led to the development of this concept, because it is that needs a kind of a manufacturing development and also educational function of the city, and it talks about some of the key attributes those cities should have to get the character of a smart city. It's talking about the smart people with the good quality of the life, number one. Smart people, it is defined in terms of people with higher education, good job, and good quality of the life. Second, it talks about the smart governance. Smart governance, it talks about in terms of e-governance, and also not totally eliminating the earlier form of governance, but it will have lot of responsiveness to the people, and also simultaneously satisfying all the need of the citizen living in the cities. So it is a smart governance. It's a smart economy. It also talks about the smart and the green environment. It also talks about the smart technology and mobility. It also talks about the benchmark of the smart city. It should have a smart transport, smart planning, good water supply, sewage and sanitation, solid waste management, storm rainwater harvesting system, good 24/7 electricity, telephone connection, Wi-Fi connection, healthcare facilities, education facilities, firefighting, and also renewable energy uses. So these are the varieties of elements talked about in terms of smart city. So far whatsoever we talked about, we have talked about in terms of the demographic transition of the society and certain aspirations, certain government definition, how it have changed over a period of time. But what is important, that is when city is developing, along with there has been a change, the phenomena 3, that is socio-cultural component of development. The increase of the size of the population has increased, the density of the population has increased. Along with that, there has been an enormous process of transition. What are those transitions? It is talked about a transition in the social relationship, transition in the social structure. How it transition takes place? Because a transition takes place in terms of a kind of a from informal relationship to the formal relationship. Total dependency on the primary group. It was the phenomenon of the pre-urban society. In the urban society, dependency on the secondary group. And then we find a kind of a growing individualism in the urban areas. That is a phenomenon, because here it is the individual that is important through the ideas and its own individual achievement and mobilities. It also talks about the whole proliferation of heterogeneity in the urban areas. Heterogeneity in terms of it is a place that is occupied by the people of different culture, race, ethnicity, language. So we find a heterogeneous formation. what happened gradually in the whole process of heterogeneity, within that there is also enormous proliferation of cultural group. Those cultural group try to remain rooted in their own place. So there has been process of cultural concentration in some of the areas. In most of the city in India, traditional cities, we find that some part is occupied, some linguistic group, another part is occupied by another linguistic group. It is not to say that there is no element of heterogeneity. It is to say that notwithstanding the heterogeneity, there is process of cultural rootedness in Indian cities. And there is also simultaneously the whole process of ghettoization of several cultural groups. So what we find, all this phenomenon in terms of gradual increase of density of population, gradual increase in informality, formality in social relationship, individualism, and also heterogeneity and ghettoization of culture, this widely impacted the social institution, the neighborhood, family, marriage, and kinship institution in the society. The Indian cities also simultaneously encounters the problem of what we call the overcrowding. Overcrowding in that way, a city is having the capacity to accommodate roughly around 1,000 people per square kilometer. And now we find many a time it is 10,000 people per square kilometer without having sufficient the coverage to the basic amenities. We also find simultaneously the process of development of slum in the urban areas. The government statistics shows that more than 21% of urban population live in the urban slum. Those who suffer from the problem of poor housing condition, lack of basic amenities, lack of water supply, electricity, etc. like this. Urban area has also looked into the experiences the phenomena of urban crime and also pollution. As the consumerism has been part of the process, what it is looked into over a period of time that along with growing consumerism, there has been increasing phenomena of the population, because number of the motor vehicle has increased, number of the industrial unit has increased, and they are widely contributing to the growth of CO2 in the city. And we find that the pollution has been one of the phenomena in most of the Indian cities. Rather, if most polluted cities of the world are to be counted, cities in India come within the first 20 cities, at least 10 cities will be from India. Along with the huge concentration of the population, there has also been the problem of waste management in the urban cities. The government statistics shows that 56 million metric tons on solid waste is produced every year, and only 36% of these are treated. So despite everything, all those development in the cities, we are finding that there has been a process of growth of urban cities in India, along with varieties of this problem. So let us come to whatsoever we have discussed today. Let us sum up. We have discussed that what is a city, how cities are to be looked into. There we have discussed that cities are looked into varieties of the social scientists along with the sociologist. The sociological definition looks into city is in terms of its social conditioning and surroundings. So what are social conditioning and surroundings in terms of the density of the population and different cultural practices and emergence of varieties of heterogeneity therein. So it is a relative term. We talked about a relatively dense population, a relatively heterogeneous population, and also simultaneously relatively heterogeneous economy. So when you are talking about city, we are also talking about in terms of shifting of its character. that is a demographic shift in terms of population, economic shift, non-agriculture to agricultural. Then we are talking about a cultural shift from a simple to a complex, from homogeneity to heterogeneity, from informality to formal culture, from collectivity to individualism. Then we have talked about also, along with the urban growth, we have found the problem of urban problem that is linked to overcrowding, poor housing, lack of basic amenities, emergence of the slum, crime, etc. like this. What we find in the whole process, that is urban growth has been linked with both geographical development, economic development, also kind of a social expansion. Despite all those problems, what is important is that urban India has remained to be the haven of hope to the millions. Those who aspire for higher education, those who aspire for a good job, those who aspire for a good quality of life, usually there has been aspiration for mobility to the urban areas. It is not to say that rural areas are deprived of this thing. It is only to say that there has been concentration of certain opportunities in the urban areas. That's why the Urban Commission of India, it talked in 1986 that urban area of India has emerged to be the haven of hope to the millions of Indians in Indian countryside. Thank you very much for being with us, and I hope you have enjoyed this talk.